The great hall of the HFY Dominion was silent. Hundreds of alien nobles, warriors, and advisors stood in neat rows, their golden armor shining under the high ceiling lights. At the center of the throne room sat King Valor the Unyielding, his massive form resting on an obsidian throne. His glowing red eyes scanned the gathered crowd. A single figure stood before him, a human. Commander Adrian Voss of the Terran Defense Force clenched his fists. His sharp blue eyes met the king's gaze without fear. He was surrounded by towering Scifi warriors, their sharp features and muscular bodies making them look like gods of war. But Adrian had faced worse. The silence was broken by the deep, commanding voice of the king. "Commander Voss, you have been chosen. You will wed one of my daughters." Murmurs spread through the hall. Some Scifi nobles looked disgusted. Others seemed confused. The king continued, his voice firm. "The prophecy speaks of ruin for our empire. Only the blood of a human can change our fate. Thus, my decree is final. A Scifi princess must be bound to a human. You, commander, are that human." Adrian's jaw tightened. He had been dragged from his ship, brought to this alien world, and now they expected him to marry into their royal family. He took a deep breath. "And if I refuse?" A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. No one defied the king. King Valor's expression did not change. "Then you will be executed." Some nobles smirked. They thought a human would break under the pressure. But Adrian wasn't just any human. He had fought in wars, led soldiers into battle, and survived impossible odds. He straightened his back. "If I must marry, then I have my own demands." The hall erupted in whispers. A warrior noble stepped forward, glaring at Adrian. "You dare make demands of our king? You are nothing but a primitive." Adrian ignored him and kept his eyes on Valor. "If you want me in your empire, then I will not be a prisoner. I want full diplomatic rights and the freedom to act as I see fit." For the first time, the king's lips curled into something like amusement. "You are bold, human. Perhaps that is why fate has chosen you. Very well. You shall have diplomatic freedom, but you will honor our customs. The marriage will proceed." Adrian exhaled slowly. He wasn't happy, but at least he wasn't a caged animal. "Who am I supposed to marry?" he asked. 3 figures stepped forward from the shadows. The princesses. The first was Princess Scifi. She stood tall, her dark red hair tied in a warrior's braid. Her golden armor clung to her powerful frame, and her piercing gaze was filled with challenge. Adrian recognized the look. She saw him as an opponent, someone she needed to test. The second was Princess Lyra. She had an air of cold intelligence. Her long silver robes flowed behind her as she walked. Unlike her sister, she did not glare. Instead, she observed him carefully, as if studying an unknown creature. The last was Princess Valor. She was different. She did not wear the royal colors. Instead, she was dressed in simple black, her violet eyes filled with open hatred. Unlike the others, she did not even try to hide her disgust. King Valor gestured to them. "One of these 3 will be your bride. Choose." Adrian frowned. How could he make such a choice in a moment? He barely knew them. Before he could speak, Scifi stepped forward. "He is weak. I challenge him to a duel. If he cannot hold a sword, he does not deserve a Scifi wife." Lyra sighed. "Is violence your only solution, sister? We do not know his mind yet. Perhaps he is clever enough to survive, even if he is not strong." Valor scoffed. "This is a mistake. I will never marry a human. If you force me, I will escape." The tension in the hall was thick. Adrian realized he was being tested. They wanted to see what kind of man he was. He smirked. "A duel, huh? All right. But if I win, I choose the rules of this marriage." Scifi's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Agreed." The nobles gasped. This human was either foolish or fearless. King Valor raised his hand. "Enough." The challenge will take place tomorrow. Until then, the hum will be our guest. Let us see if fate truly favors him. As the guards led Adrian away, he knew one thing for sure. This was not just about marriage. This was about survival, power, and proving that humans were more than what these aliens thought. And Adrian had no intention of losing. The royal palace of Sci-Fi was a fortress of steel and stone, its towering spires piercing the sky. The halls were wide, lined with golden statues of past rulers. Adrian Voss walked between two heavily armed guards, his sharp eyes studying every detail. He wasn't afraid. No, fear had left him long ago, burned away in the fires of war. Instead, he was thinking, planning. A duel against an alien warrior princess. That wasn't something he had expected when he left Earth. But if the Scifi thought he would just roll over and die, they were about to be disappointed. The guards led him into a luxurious chamber. The walls were covered in shimmering blue cloth, the bed large enough to fit 4 people. But Adrian wasn't interested in comfort. He was in enemy territory. The door closed behind him. He was alone. Or so he thought. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. Adrian turned quickly, his instincts sharp. In the far corner of the room stood Princess Lyra, her silver robes flowing like liquid metal. Her piercing yellow eyes studied him, calm and unreadable. I like to think I'm a little of both, Adrian replied with a smirk. Lyra did not smile. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. You confuse my people. Humans are seen as unpredictable, chaotic. You could have accepted my father's decree without resistance. Instead, you challenged my sister. Adrian shrugged. Your sister challenged me first. I just made sure the fight had meaning. Lyra tilted her head slightly. Interesting. You don't just fight for survival. You fight for control. Adrian met her gaze, his voice steady. I fight for my freedom. For a moment, there was silence. Then Lyra sighed. Seraphis is strong. She has trained since childhood to be a warrior. If you lose, you will be seen as weak. And in our culture, weakness means death. Adrian smirked. Then I guess I better not lose. Lyra studied him for a few more seconds before turning away. Good luck, human. You will need it. She disappeared through a hidden door, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts. The duel begins. The next morning, the royal courtyard was filled with Scifi nobles and warriors. The arena was large, the floor made of polished stone. Banners waved in the wind as the sun cast a golden light over the gathered spectators. At the center of the arena stood Princess Seraphis. She wore lightweight battle armor, her red hair tied back. She gripped a twin-bladed staff, its edges sharp enough to cut steel. Adrian stepped forward, wearing simple combat gear provided by the palace. His weapon, a single combat knife. Some of the nobles laughed at the sight. The human fights with a toy. One of them sneered. Seraphis, however, did not laugh. She studied Adrian carefully. You could have chosen a proper weapon. Adrian rolled his shoulders. A weapon is only as good as the one who wields it. The king raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. The duel begins. Fight with honor. Then, with a single motion, he brought his hand down. Seraphis moved first, fast as lightning. She lunged, her twin-bladed staff spinning. Adrian barely dodged, the blade slicing the air just inches from his face. The crowd roared in excitement. Seraphis pressed forward, her strikes coming hard and fast. Adrian ducked, weaved, and rolled, avoiding each attack by the smallest margins. He wasn't trying to win just yet. He was learning. Seraphis was strong, fast, skilled, but she had one weakness. She fought like a Scifi. Scifi warriors were trained for brute strength and overwhelming force. They had never fought a human before. Adrian was smaller, quicker, and unpredictable. He dodged another strike, then suddenly moved in close, Before Seraphis could react, he grabbed her wrist and twisted, forcing her weapon down. The crowd gasped. Seraphis growled and tried to push him away, but Adrian was already moving. He ducked under her arm, twisted around her body, and pressed his knife against her throat. Silence. Seraphis's chest heaved. She was stronger than him, but at this moment, she was defeated. The king's voice echoed through the arena. Enough. The duel is over. Adrian stepped back and lowered his knife. He had proven his point. Seraphis clenched her fists. Her pride was wounded, but she did something unexpected. She smiled. "You are not as weak as I thought, human," she admitted. Adrian smirked. "And you're not as scary as I thought." The crowd murmured. Many had expected Adrian to fail. Instead, he had done the impossible. He had beaten a Scifi princess in combat. King Valor stood from his throne. His expression was unreadable. "You have earned my respect, human, but the decree remains. You must choose a bride." Adrian looked at the three princesses. Seraphis stood tall, her respect for him clear. Lyra watched him with quiet curiosity. And Vayara glared at him with pure hatred. Adrian sighed. This was far from over. "I will decide soon," he said. "But first, I need to understand what I'm really getting into." The king nodded. "Very well. But know this, human, whether you wish it or not, your fate is tied to ours now." Adrian looked at the gathered crowd, the towering palace, and the alien world around him. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was a part of something far bigger than himself. The sun had set over the grand palace of Scifi, bathing the sky in hues of violet and deep blue. Adrian Voss stood on the balcony of his chambers, gazing at the alien landscape. Towering spires stretched toward the heavens, and in the distance, massive warships hovered in the sky like silent sentinels. He had won the duel. He had earned the respect of the Scifi people. But now came the real challenge, choosing a bride. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. "Enter," Adrian said, turning around. The door slid open, and Princess Seraphis walked in, still dressed in her combat armor. She moved with a warrior's grace, her piercing eyes locked onto his. "You fought well today, human," she said, her voice carrying a note of approval. Adrian crossed his arms. "Not bad for someone with a toy weapon, right?" Seraphis chuckled. "You surprised me. That does not happen often." She stepped closer, her expression turning serious. "If you choose me, know this. I will not be a weak wife. I will expect you to be strong. If you fall behind, I will not slow down for you." Adrian nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Seraphis studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod before turning to leave. Just as she reached the door, another figure entered, Princess Lyra. The two sisters exchanged glances. There was no hostility, but neither seemed pleased to see the other. Seraphis smirked. "Here to test him in your own way, sister." Lyra sighed. "Unlike you, I do not rely on tests of strength. I prefer intelligence." Seraphis gave Adrian one last look. "Choose wisely, human." Then she left. Lyra turned her golden eyes toward Adrian. "You impressed my father today. That is not easy to do." Adrian leaned against the wall. "Yeah, I noticed. What about you? Are you impressed?" Lyra tilted her head slightly. "I do not make decisions based on emotion. I analyze. You are different from what I expected. Humans are unpredictable, but that is not always a weakness." She stepped closer, her voice quieter. "If you choose me, I will not demand battle from you, but I will expect wisdom. My role is to shape the future of our empire. If you cannot think ahead, you will be useless to me." Adrian met her gaze. "And if I prove useful?" A small smile appeared on Lyra's lips. "Then you will find I can be an interesting ally." She turned and walked out, leaving Adrian to process her words. But before he could, the final princess entered. Vayara. Unlike her sisters, She did not hide her emotions. Her violet eyes were filled with cold anger. She wore no royal colors, only simple black robes. Adrian sighed. "Let me guess. You're here to threaten me." Veyara's jaw clenched. "I don't need to threaten you, human. I will never accept this. No matter what my father says, I will not be forced into this. Humiliation." Adrian studied her carefully. "Then why are you here?" Veyara hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Because you have a choice, and I want you to make the right one." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" Veyara exhaled sharply. "Not me. Anyone but me. If you choose me, I will make your life a living nightmare. You may have won a fight, but that does not make you worthy of me." Adrian smirked. "You're awfully confident, but tell me, why do you hate humans so much?" Veyara's expression darkened. "Because humans are dangerous. They bring chaos. We have ruled the stars for centuries. But your kind spreads like wildfire. You are unpredictable, uncontrollable." Adrian leaned in slightly. "And that scares you, doesn't it?" Veyara's eyes flared with anger, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Adrian alone once more. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled. 3 princesses, 3 choices. Scifi, the warrior who respected strength. Veyara, the strategist who valued intelligence. Veyara, the rebel who despised him. And all of them, in some way, held the future of the HFY Empire in their hands. The king's decision. The next morning, the royal court gathered once more. The grand hall was filled with nobles, warriors, and advisors, all waiting for Adrian's decision. The 3 princesses stood side by side, each watching him with different expressions. King Valor sat upon his throne, his gaze firm. "The time has come. Human, choose." Adrian took a deep breath. He had thought long and hard about this. Each choice had consequences. Each choice could shape the future. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the princesses. And then he made his decision. The grand hall of the HFY Palace was silent. Hundreds of eyes were locked on Adrian Voss as he stood before the king and his 3 daughters. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like a crushing force. King Valor leaned forward on his throne. His golden eyes gleamed under the torchlight. "Human, the time has come. Choose your bride." Adrian scanned the 3 princesses. Scifi, the warrior, stood tall with her arms crossed. There was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity. If he chose her, his life would be filled with battles, training, and endless challenges. She would never accept weakness. Veyara, the strategist, watched him with calm calculation. She was intelligent and patient, a woman who saw marriage as an alliance rather than a bond of love. If he chose her, she would test his mind, his ability to plan ahead, to think beyond the present moment. Veyara, the rebel, stood stiffly, refusing to look at him. Her hatred for this arrangement was clear. If he chose her, he would be tying himself to someone who despised him. But she was also the one who feared humans the most, and fear was often born from something deeper. Adrian took a deep breath. Then he stepped forward and spoke. "I choose Veyara." A murmur ran through the court. Some were surprised. Others nodded in approval. Scifi smirked, as if expecting it. "A wise choice, human. You may not have the strength of a warrior, but perhaps you have the mind of a tactician." She stepped back, no bitterness in her voice. Veyara, on the other hand, clenched her fists. Though she had begged him not to choose her, there was something unreadable in her expression. Veyara remained still for a moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "A logical decision," she said, stepping forward to stand beside him. "You are an interesting man, Adrian Voss. Perhaps this union will be more beneficial than I first thought." King Valor gave a satisfied nod. "Then it is decided. The ceremony shall take place in 3 days. Until then, Adrian, you will learn our ways. You may have earned our respect, but respect alone is not enough to rule beside my daughter." Adrian inclined his head. He had expected no less. As the nobles began to disperse, Veyara turned sharply and walked away without another word. Seraphis gave Adrian a short nod before leaving as well. Veyara, however, lingered. "Come, human. If you are to be my husband, we must talk." A lesson in power. Veyara led Adrian through the palace, past towering statues of ancient Scifi rulers and murals depicting great battles among the stars. She finally stopped at a private study, where a massive holographic map flickered in the air. "This is the empire you will be a part of," she said, gesturing at the glowing display. Thousands of systems, hundreds of species, and all of them held together by power. Adrian studied the map. The Scifi ruled over vast stretches of the galaxy. Their empire was unmatched in size and military might. Veyara continued, "My father is a great warrior, but even he understands that war alone cannot sustain an empire. Power must be balanced between strength and strategy. That is why I chose to study politics instead of battle." Adrian smirked. "So, you're saying I didn't just marry a princess. I married the future queen." Veyara's eyes sparkled. "Perhaps, if you prove yourself worthy." She turned, stepping closer to him. "You were a soldier, were you not? Tell me, human, what is the greatest weapon in war?" Adrian considered for a moment. "Most would say an army or advanced technology. But I'd say information. The right knowledge at the right time can change everything." Veyara's lips curled into a smile. "You are learning fast. Good, because in this empire, knowledge is often deadlier than any blade. A growing threat." That night, Adrian sat in his chamber, thinking about everything that had happened. He had come to this planet as an outsider, forced into a situation beyond his control. But now, things were changing. He wasn't just a pawn in the Scifi's game. He was becoming a player. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Before he could answer, Veyara stormed in. Her violet eyes burned with anger. "You made a mistake, human." Adrian sighed. "Nice to see you too, princess. What mistake are we talking about?" Veyara stepped closer, her voice low. "You think you're safe because you impressed my father. Because my sister is willing to play this game with you. You don't understand our people. There are those who do not accept this union, who do not accept you." Adrian's expression hardened. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" Veyara's jaw tightened. "Consider it a warning. There are factions within the empire that see humans as a threat, and some of them would rather kill you than allow you to stand beside a Scifi princess." Adrian leaned back, considering her words. He had expected resistance, but he hadn't realized just how deep it ran. "So, what do you suggest?" he asked. Veyara hesitated for a fraction of a second before saying, "Prove them wrong. Prove that you are worthy of standing among us. Otherwise, you will not survive for long." Then, without another word, she turned and left, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts. For the first time since arriving on this planet, he realized something important. Winning a duel was one thing. Surviving the politics of the Scifi Empire would be an entirely different battle. The night air was cool as Adrian Voss stood on the balcony of his chambers, staring at the alien stars above. The Scifi homeworld was beautiful, but beneath its beauty, there was tension. Someone wanted him dead. Veyara's warning still echoed in his mind. She had made it clear there were those in the Empire who hated humans, and they would rather see him eliminated than standing beside a Scifi princess. He clenched his fists. He had fought battles before. But this was different. This wasn't a war of weapons. This was a war of survival. A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You seem troubled, Adrian." He turned to see Veyara standing at the doorway. She had changed from her royal attire into something simpler, a dark robe, flowing like silk around her. Despite her calm expression, her golden eyes studied him carefully. Adrian forced a smile. You could say that. It's not every day someone tells me there's a target on my back. Liara sighed, stepping beside him. You should not be surprised. The XL Theory are proud. Some of them see your presence here as an insult to our traditions. Adrian exhaled. Let me guess. You already knew this would happen. Liara nodded. Of course. I am a strategist, remember. But the real question is, what will you do about it? Adrian smirked. I was hoping you had a plan. Liara chuckled. I do. But first, you must understand one thing. If you show weakness, they will tear you apart. You must make them believe you are more than just a human. You must become someone they respect. Or fear. Adrian crossed his arms. And how do I do that? Liara's eyes gleamed. By proving that you are not just a survivor, but a ruler. A public challenge. The next morning, Adrian walked through the palace halls, accompanied by Liara and 2 royal guards. He could feel the stares of the nobles, the silent judgment in their eyes. Then a voice rang out. Human. Adrian turned to see a XL Theory noble standing in the courtyard, dressed in silver battle armor. His 4 arms were crossed, his expression full of disdain. You do not belong here, outsider, the noble sneered. Your victory in the duel was luck, but luck will not protect you forever. The crowd grew silent. All eyes were now on Adrian. He met the noble's gaze without flinching. And what do you plan to do about it? The noble smirked. I challenge you. A test of skill, not of strength, but of intelligence. If you fail, you will leave this palace in disgrace. Liara leaned in and whispered, This is a trap. If you refuse, they will say you are a coward. If you accept and lose, they will say you are unworthy. Adrian's mind raced. Then, slowly, he smiled. I accept. The game of kings. The challenge took place in the Great Hall. A large strategic board was placed in the center of the room, displaying a holographic battlefield. It was an ancient XL Theory war game, one that tested leadership, tactics, and cunning. Adrian sat on one side. The noble, Lord Calyrax, sat on the other. The rules were simple. Each player commanded an army. The goal was to outmaneuver and defeat the opponent through superior strategy. The game began. Calyrax moved first, launching an aggressive attack. His forces swept across the board like a storm, overwhelming Adrian's defenses. The crowd whispered among themselves. The human is losing. Adrian remained calm. He studied the battlefield. Then, slowly, he began setting traps. He allowed Calyrax to advance, making him think he was winning. But then, when the noble had overextended his forces, Adrian struck. With a swift series of moves, Adrian surrounded Calyrax's army, cutting off his supply lines. Within minutes, the noble's forces collapsed. The game was over. The hall fell into stunned silence. Then, slowly, applause broke out. Even some of the nobles who had doubted Adrian nodded in approval. Calyrax stood in disbelief. He had been defeated by a human. Adrian leaned back, smirking. Not bad for an outsider, huh? Liara's eyes shone with amusement. You continue to surprise me, Adrian. Calyrax clenched his jaw. Then, reluctantly, he bowed. You have proven yourself, human. I will not question your place here again. A new enemy in the shadows. That night, Adrian sat in his chambers, thinking about his victory. He had won the challenge, but he knew it was only the beginning. Then, a sound, a whisper of movement. Adrian reacted instantly, dodging to the side just as a blade slashed through the air where he had been standing. He turned sharply. A figure in dark armor stood in the shadows, holding a dagger. An assassin. Adrian lunged forward, grabbing the attacker's wrist and twisting. The assassin struggled, but Adrian was faster. With a swift strike, he knocked the dagger away and pinned the figure against the wall. Who sent you? Adrian demanded. The assassin snarled. Then, with a flick of their wrist, they pressed a hidden device on their armor and vanished in a flash of energy. Adrian cursed under his breath. Whoever it was, they had escaped. But now he had proof. Someone wasn't just plotting against him. Someone wanted him dead. Adrian Voss stood in the dimly lit chamber, his breathing steady, but his mind racing. The assassin had vanished, leaving behind only the whisper of danger in the air. He stared at the wall where the figure had disappeared, his instincts screaming that this was just the beginning. Someone had sent a killer after him, and next time, they wouldn't fail. A sharp knock on the door made him tense, but he relaxed when he recognized the voice. Adrian, open the door. Now. It was Seraphis. He unlocked the door, and the warrior princess stormed in, her expression sharp. Her violet skin glowed faintly under the lights, and her 4 arms were tense. Behind her, Lyra followed, her face calm, but her golden eyes filled with curiosity. I heard there was a fight. Who was it? Seraphis demanded. Adrian crossed his arms. An assassin. They disappeared before I could stop them. Lyra's expression darkened. An assassination attempt this soon. That means someone is getting desperate. Seraphis clenched her fists. This is what I warned you about, human. Not everyone in this empire accepts you. Some will ever accept you. Adrian exhaled. Do you have any idea who might be behind this? Seraphis and Lyra exchanged a look. Then Lyra spoke, her voice low. There are factions in the court that oppose this marriage. Some are loyal to my father, but others, they believe outsiders should never hold power in the Exceltheri Empire. Seraphis nodded. And there is one name that comes to mind. Lord Valrix. Adrian frowned. Who's that? Lyra's voice was filled with distaste. A noble with strong influence. He commands several fleets and has loyal warriors in the Empire's armies. He was one of the loudest voices against my father's decree. If anyone has the means to send an assassin, it's him. Adrian's jaw tightened. He wasn't afraid of a fight, but this wasn't a battlefield where bullets and blades decided victory. This was politics, where betrayal and strategy ruled. So what do we do? He asked. Lyra's lips curled into a small smile. We don't fight in the shadows like cowards. We bring this battle into the open. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Seraphis smirked. We challenge him. Publicly. Force him to reveal his intentions. Adrian nodded. He liked this plan better. He had always preferred an enemy he could see. A gathering of nobles. The royal hall was packed. Nobles, generals, and council members stood in a semicircle around the raised throne where King Valor sat. The alien ruler observed his court with unreadable golden eyes, his presence alone demanding silence. Adrian stood at the center, beside Lyra and Seraphis. Today, they would make their move. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Lord Valrix entered. He was tall, with dark blue skin and sharp silver eyes. His regal armor gleamed under the torches, and behind him walked several nobles, his supporters. What is the meaning of this? Valrix asked, his voice deep and commanding. Adrian stepped forward, his stance firm. There was an attempt on my life last night. Someone sent an assassin to remove me. I believe that someone is you. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. Valrix's expression remained calm, but his eyes flickered with something dangerous. You accuse me of such treachery. A bold claim, human. Do you have proof? Adrian smiled coldly. Not yet, but I know your type. You hate that I'm here. You see my presence as a threat to your power. He stepped closer. And I think you're scared. Valrix's eyes narrowed. Careful with your words. King Valor finally spoke, his deep voice silencing the room. Lord Valrix, these are serious accusations. Do you deny them? Valrix placed a hand over his chest, his expression composed. Of course. I would never act against my king's will. If someone attacked the human, It was not by my order. Adrian clenched his fists. The noble was lying, but without proof, they couldn't move against him. Liara stepped in smoothly. Then you would have no objection to an investigation. If you are innocent, you should welcome it. Valrix hesitated, then forced a smile. Of course, I have nothing to hide. King Valor nodded. Then it is decided. Until we find the truth, Adrian Voss will be given additional protection. And if we discover that anyone, his golden eyes locked onto Valrix, has acted against the peace of this court, they will face consequences. Valrix bowed his head, but Adrian could see the anger burning beneath his calm mask. This wasn't over. A warning in the dark. That night, Adrian sat in his chamber, thinking about what had happened. He had challenged Valrix in front of the entire court, but the noble hadn't backed down. A soft knock at the door made him tense. He reached for the dagger on his belt before opening the door slightly. Veyara stood there. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her violet eyes were unreadable. And for once, she didn't look angry. "You were bold today, human," she said. Adrian leaned against the table. "Yeah. You going to tell me I made a mistake?" Veyara shook her head. "No. But I will tell you this. You are now playing a dangerous game. Lord Valrix will not forget what you did. He is powerful, and he has allies." Adrian sighed. "Yeah, I figured. So, what's your advice?" Veyara hesitated before saying, "Be careful who you trust. This empire does not tolerate weakness, and right now, many see you as weak. Prove them wrong." Then, without another word, she left. Adrian sat down, gripping his dagger. The war had begun, and he had no choice but to win. Adrian Voss knew the storm was coming. After his public challenge to Lord Valrix, the palace was filled with tension. The nobles whispered in the halls, and the warriors of the Tel-Theri Empire watched him with calculating eyes. Everyone was waiting to see if the human would survive or fall. And Adrian had no plans of falling. A deadly invitation. Late at night, a message arrived. A small holographic drone hovered into Adrian's chambers, projecting a shimmering blue image of Lord Valrix. "Human, I will not play games any longer. Meet me at the Ashen Courtyard at dawn, if you have the courage." The image flickered and vanished. Liara, who stood nearby, exhaled sharply. "It's a trap." Seraphis crossed her arms. "Obviously, he's done pretending." Adrian smirked. "Good. Neither am I." Liara stepped closer, her golden eyes serious. "You don't have to do this alone." Adrian shook his head. "If I bring guards, Valrix will say I'm weak. I need to show them that humans aren't prey." Seraphis grinned. "Then I hope you're ready to kill him, because he won't hold back." Adrian's expression hardened. "Neither will I." Duel at dawn. The Ashen Courtyard was vast and silent, its ancient stone ground bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. The space was sacred, a place where disputes were settled through combat. Adrian stood in the center, his heart steady. He wasn't afraid. He had fought worse odds before. Across from him, Lord Valrix stepped forward, clad in dark battle armor. His forearms flexed, each hand gripping a weapon, a long plasma blade, a short dagger, and a pair of energy gauntlets. The gathered nobles and warriors formed a silent circle around them. Even King Valor watched from above, his golden eyes unreadable. Valrix sneered. "A human should never have been allowed to stand beside royalty. I will correct that mistake today." Adrian cracked his neck. "You talk too much. Let's get this over with." The gong sounded. The duel began. Man versus monster. Valrix moved fast. His plasma blade slashed through the air, aiming for Adrian's throat. Adrian dodged, feeling the heat of the blade pass just inches from his skin. He countered with a sharp strike, but Valrix blocked with his gauntlets, sending out a burst of energy that knocked Adrian backward. The crowd murmured. Valric's charge, using all four arms to strike from multiple angles. Adrian's reflexes kicked in. He ducked, rolled, and weaved through the attacks, his mind calculating every move. He wasn't stronger. He wasn't faster. But he was smarter. He baited Valrix into attacking recklessly, forcing him to overextend. And when Valrix made the mistake of swinging too wide, Adrian struck. His fist connected with Valrix's jaw, sending the noble stumbling. Before he could recover, Adrian grabbed his dagger and sliced across his arm. A deep cut, not fatal, but enough to make a point. The crowd gasped. Valrix roared, his silver eyes burning with rage. "I will not lose to a mere human." Adrian grinned. "Too late, you already are." Valrix charged one last time, desperate, wild, and Adrian finished it. He dodged, twisted around, and drove his knee into Valrix's chest, sending the noble crashing to the ground. Silence filled the courtyard. Valrix lay still, gasping for breath. Adrian stood over him, victorious. A new dawn. King Valor rose from his throne. His deep voice echoed through the courtyard. The human has proven himself. He is no outsider. He is no weakling. He stands as an equal among us. The nobles bowed their heads. Even those who had doubted Adrian now looked at him with something new, respect. Valrix, humiliated, struggled to his feet. He locked eyes with Adrian, his expression full of hatred, but he did not speak. He simply turned and walked away. Seraphis smirked. That was satisfying to watch. Liara smiled softly. "You did well, Adrian." Adrian exhaled. He had survived. He had won. But he knew this was just the beginning. He turned to the king and bowed. "Your Majesty, I came here as a soldier. But today, I stand as something more. I will not just be a guest in this empire. I will be its protector." King Valor nodded, approval in his gaze. "Then let it be known. Adrian Voss is no longer a stranger. He is one of us. And those who stand against him, stand against the throne itself." The declaration shook the court. Adrian had come to this world as an outsider, but now he was part of its future. And no one would dare challenge him again.